This morning we're going to attempt to cover chapters 19 and 20, and so I'm going to do my best to stay in our normal time frame. This morning we're going to talk about friendship. I would imagine growing up in school that almost everyone, I hope everyone in here at some point in their high school career or junior high career or elementary career, whatever, learned a little bit about Helen Keller. A woman who, because of an illness very young in her childhood, was deaf and blind. And yet, history tells us she was able to overcome them and do amazing things. I would also make the assumption that many people in this room that during their school years also read of Mark Twain. What some people don't know is that despite there being 40-something odd years between them in age, that Mark Twain and Helen Keller were actually quite good friends. Twain said of Keller that she was the eighth wonder of the world. He said she was fellow to Caesar, Alexander, Napoleon, Homer, Shakespeare, and in his words, not mine, that she was with the immortals. Keller said, "The instant I clasped his hand in mine, I knew that he was my friend." Twain's hand is full of whimsies and the drollest of humors, and while you hold it, the drollery changes to sympathy and championships. Keller said the reason that she liked Mark Twain was because he didn't treat her like a freak, she said, but as a handicapped woman seeking a way to circumvent extraordinary difficulties. After their meeting, the two kept in touch. Keller was very young, and when Mark Twain discovered that she, of all people, wanted to go to Ratcliffe College, but she was having some financial difficulties, he wrote to some friends of his asking if they would sponsor her and help pay her way through school, even as Twain was going through bankruptcy. They met on a number of occasions. When Twain's wife died, it was Keller that sent a letter to him communicating to press on, to carry on, despite the loss of your loved one. Twain was not scared to tease Keller about things. He was recorded as once saying that blindness is an extraordinary business. He said, if you don't believe that, wake up in the middle of the night on the wrong side of the bed with the house on fire and try to find the door. Everyone else became extremely awkward, but Keller laughed because friends can say things around us that others hesitate to say. Keller was recorded of saying these words, that she liked Mark Twain because he treated me like a competent human being, and that's why I loved him. Twain wrote, if I could have been deaf, dumb, and blind, I might also have arrived at something. Friendship's an interesting thing, isn't it? That we can have these unique friendships and relationships who we allow into our life and we let them get away with saying just about anything, right? That they can pick on you and they can say things about you and to you that if anyone else said it would bother you, but not the Keller and the Twain. As we look at the life of David had a friend like that. His name was Jonathan. He just so happened to be the king's son, but God sent Jonathan into David's life that when the world went absolutely nuts for David, that he was a friend who would stand by him and help him through it. And we see this really play out in chapters 19 and 20. And as we look at these chapters this morning, I want to share with you 4 signs of true friendship. And the first is this. You see, when you have a true friend, and you are a true friend, what true friendship looks like is that a true friend speaks up on behalf of his friend. We read in chapter 19, verses 1 through 7, now Saul told Jonathan his son and all of his servants to put David to death. But Jonathan, Saul's son, greatly delighted in David. And so Jonathan told David, saying, Saul, my father, is seeking to put you to death. Now, therefore, please be on guard in the morning. Stay in the secret place. Hide yourself. I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. And if I find out anything, then I will tell you." Then Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, "Do not let the king sin against his servant David, since he's not sinned against you, and since his deeds have been very beneficial to you. For he took his life in his hand. He struck the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by putting David to death without a cause?" And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul vowed, "As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death." And then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these words. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as formerly. When Jonathan finds out that Saul wants to kill David, and understand what's happening. What we saw a couple of weeks ago, the last time we were looking at David's life, what we saw was that the king's trying to be covert about it. I'm going to send him into war. Maybe he'll die. I'm going to marry him off to my daughter, and maybe there'll be this deal with the Philistines. He's trying to be very covert and very behind the scenes. Now Saul is being very blatant. We're going to kill David. That's what we're going to do. He is going to die. And when Jonathan finds out, he speaks up. He doesn't remain silent. He goes to his father. He says, "Don't you understand? First off, David's done nothing against you. David has not sinned against you. Secondly, David fought for you and killed the Philistine. And thirdly, you will be sinning, because if you kill David, you will shed innocent blood." And in a phrase that we'll learn means very little to Saul, he said, "As the Lord lives." He makes a promise that as the Lord lives, we're going to spare David's life. And you're going to find out in the next couple of chapters that meant absolutely nothing. But you know what we do see is that a true friend speaks up on behalf of his friend or her friend. It's what they do. We seem to be living in a day and age when people don't want to speak up. People are afraid of being canceled. People are afraid of being ridiculed. People are afraid of being targeted. And as a result, in many ways, we're being shunned into silence. That others may can come against you. Others may can come against your friends. But you should say nothing in response. What the true friend does is he speaks up. Now, this doesn't mean that a true friend glosses over what's wrong. Is when you do wrong and you make mistakes, you should have people that can speak into your life, be honest with you, that can say things that many times you don't let others say, and they speak truth into your life. You should have those. They don't gloss over your wrong, but they do speak up in the face of false accusation. And I wonder in this room, as you think about that, how many friends do you truly have in life? Regardless of what happens, regardless of what is going on, if someone says something about you that is not true, they will always speak up. They won't gloss it over. They don't take a step back. They don't say, "Wait till I tell him or her." They speak up. And they say, "That's not my friend." And then, I wonder how many people are you a friend to? That when you hear something said about someone, that you will open your mouth and speak. Not that you will say, "Let me tell you what I heard about so-and-so," but that you will say, no, in this moment, I am going to speak because what I just heard is not right. My friend's not perfect, but that part is not true. And you speak up. What a true friend does is a true friend speaks up. But secondly, a true friend intervenes on behalf of his friend. We go over to chapter 20. What we find is, if you continue reading chapter 19, that Saul says, "As the Lord lives, we're not going to kill David." But what he turns around and does is sends him back into battle. And then he tries to go kill him in his house. And David's wife, Saul's daughter Michal, protects him and saves his life. David flees to Samuel, the prophet. And Saul even says, "We're going to go to Samuel and kill him." But the Spirit of God intervenes, which is quite an interesting story that we'll look at another day. But we pick up in chapter 20, verse 1, and we find that Jonathan intervenes. Verse 1, David fled to Naioth in Ramah and came and said to Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my iniquity? What is my sin before your father that he's seeking my life?" David says, maybe I did do something. Maybe I did make a mistake. Somebody tell me, Jonathan, tell me my fault, because this man just keeps coming after me and after me and after me. And Jonathan said to him, "Far from it. You shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing great or small without disclosing it to me. So why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so." And yet David vowed, "Your father knows well that I found favor in your sight." And he has said, "Do not let Jonathan know this, or he'll be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there is hardly a step between me and death." Jonathan says, "You didn't do anything wrong." And David says, no, your dad's just not telling you. He's going to kill me. He knows we're friends. He's keeping you out of the loop. In verse 4, Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I'll do." So David said, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon. There's going to be a festival, a feast, and I ought to sit down to eat with the king. But let me go, that I might hide myself in the field until the third evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, 'David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem his city, because it is the yearly sacrifice there for the whole family.' And if he says, 'It is good,' your servant will be safe. But if he was very angry, know that he has decided on evil. Therefore, deal kindly with your servant, for you've brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is iniquity in me, put me to death yourself. For why then should you bring me to your father?" And Jonathan said, "Far be it from you. For if I should indeed learn that evil has been decided by my father to come upon you, would I not tell you about it?" And David said to Jonathan, "Who will tell me if your father answers harshly?" And Jonathan said to David, "Come, let us go into the field." So both of them went out into the field. And then Jonathan said to David, "The Lord, the God of Israel, be witness. When I've sounded out my father about this time tomorrow or the third day, behold, if there's a good feeling toward David, shall I not then send to you and make it known to you? If it please my father to do you harm, may the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not make it known to you and send you away that you may go in safety. And may the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. And if I am still alive, will you not show me the loving kindness of the Lord that I may not die? You shall not cut off your loving kindness from my house forever, nor even when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth." And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Lord require it at his hands of David's enemies." And Jonathan made David vow again because of his love for him, because he loved him as he loved his own life. They come up with a plan. And here's the plan. There's going to be a feast. David should be at the table. He says, "I'm going to skip the meals, and you tell your dad that I've gone away to sacrifice with my family. If he's okay and says no big deal, everything's fine. If he gets mad and upset, that probably means there was a plan to kill me and it's not working." And Jonathan says, "I'll do it. I'll share with you all of these things." But Jonathan said, "We got to make a deal." And don't miss the gravity of the deal. He says, "We've got to make a deal. When the Lord eliminates the enemies of David." Who is that? That's the house of Saul. When God eliminates the house of Saul, you remember me. Do you realize what Jonathan's saying? Is that when God makes you king and I'm not. When God declares you the king and I'm not, you don't forget me. When the war breaks out and the bloodshed starts and the house of David starts taking out the house of Saul, which will happen, you remember me. And you remember my children. And you and I have a covenant when you're the king and I'm not. And he says, okay, that's the deal. They make a covenant and they come up with a plan that this plan's going to play out. And then they're going to go out in the field. David's going to hide in the field. Jonathan's going to stand there. He's going to fire some arrows. A little lad's going to go get the arrows. And there's going to be a code word. And Jonathan's going to yell out the code word. And the code word's either going to reveal that David is safe or David is in danger. And so they put the whole thing in action. And then what we discover is it continues to play out, as we'll see. But what Jonathan is doing is that he's intervening on behalf of his friend. He's intervening. It's not enough just to speak. He's putting his words into action. And if we are living in a day and age when people don't want to speak up, much less do they want to do anything. Much less do they actually want to intervene. Because we're too busy for these things. You see, to intervene in someone else's life messes up your schedule. Because your friends don't go on crisis in your little lunch breaks and breaks at work on your off days. They don't work that way. They don't schedule these things where, hey, I'm going to have a crisis Friday at 6 o'clock. I'm going to wait till you're off work and the weekend begins, and then you can. It's not how it works. That it happens, and the true friend intervenes. A true friend stands up when it brings about great inconvenience, and the true friend stands up when it brings about potential danger. Jonathan has no idea how his father's going to respond to this. You know, as we talk about this, I would imagine that as we think about that true friends speak up and true friends intervene, I would imagine in this moment, and this is probably not a bad thing, that many of us realize we probably have far more acquaintances than we have friends. I met an individual this week. We were talking about some things in town. New individual I met, and we were talking about mutual acquaintances. And I said, you know so-and-so. He says, yeah, that's my buddy. He said, he's not quite my friend, he's my buddy. And as I was thinking about that and thinking about Jonathan and David, I said, that man's actually wiser than you think. My home church pastor would often stand up in front of us when I was a teenager, and this is what he would say to us. He said, if you're a person that has 1, 2, or 3 friends in a lifetime, you are more blessed than most. Because most people have a ton of acquaintances. Most people have a lot of people that will talk to you and engage with you, but they don't speak up and they don't intervene when it's inconvenient. They don't drop everything when the world falls apart. What we see with Jonathan and David is that we do. And I don't say this to make you feel bad about your friendships. What I think is being revealed here is it's really important to distinguish who are your real friends and who are you a real friend to? Who are you intervening for? At 11:30, when your family sits down to eat lunch, or when you sit down in the stands for your son or grandson's ball game, or you're at work on the project that you've been working years for, and the phone rings and there's a crisis, who are the people you will abandon all of those things for? That you'll look at your family and say, I can't eat lunch with you. I'm going to miss this one ball game. I'm going to overlook this project because I've got other stuff to do. That list is probably very small that you would sacrifice all those things. That's what Jonathan's doing. He's sacrificing all of those things in the moment for his true friend. Because ultimately what a true friend does is he sacrifices. A true friend sacrifices. They go to the meal. They have the little festival. David's not there. The first night, Saul says, well, this is a religious holiday. Maybe he's unclean. Maybe that's why he's not here. And so he misses the meal. Then the second night, he's not there at all. It's not a holiday. He says something's up. He asks Jonathan. Jonathan responds with the rehearsed line. Saul gets really, really mad, and there's an argument. And I want you to hear what Saul says in the middle of the argument in verse 30. Saul's anger burned against Jonathan in verse 30. And he said to him, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Do I not know that you're choosing the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Therefore, send, bring him to me, for he must surely die. First, Saul ridicules Jonathan's mother. He tells him he's bringing his mother shame. And then, for the first time, he outright says it. He says, Jonathan, he's going to take the throne and you're going to lose it. First time he says it, point blank. He is going to take your place. And Jonathan says, he's done nothing wrong. And in verse 33, you know what happens? Saul picks up a spear and he throws it at Jonathan. And you know what happens? When Jonathan speaks up for David, when Jonathan intervenes for David, Saul starts treating Jonathan like David. And you may think that's not a big deal. But don't you think that played out in his mind on more than one occasion? You know that time that I stood up to my dad and he treated me like his worst of enemies? You know that time I stood up to my dad for my friend and he ridiculed my very own mother? You know that time I stood up to my dad and he tried to kill me? You don't think that ran around in his head? And to feel a little bit of guilt that he's choosing his best friend over his father's kingdom? Jonathan gave up much and he sacrificed because that was his friend. And I ask you, how many friends do you really have? How many people are there that you'll open your mouth, that you'll intervene, that you will risk a whole lot for, whatever the cost, because you love them, right? That you love them. Not in some romantic way. Like in this culture of love, we don't even know what the word means anymore. Like there can be romantic love and there can be friendship love. And believe it or not, that two men and two women can tell each other they love each other. And it can mean nothing more than a very strong friendship and nothing romantic. You can't do that in this society because people look at you funny. How many people do you really care about that you're a true friend? And how many people do you have in your life that truly care? Because what we see in David and Jonathan's life is that they do care. They go out in the field. Jonathan shoots the arrows. The little lad goes, gets the arrows. The code word is declared. Jonathan sends the lad home, and then we read in verse 41, when the lad was gone, David arose from the south side, fell on his face to the ground, and he bowed 3 times. He understood that Jonathan is saving his life. They kissed each other, and they wept together. But David wept more. It appears that Jonathan loves David more, but no, David wept more. And Jonathan said to David, go in safety. And as much as we've sworn to each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord will be between me and you, and between my descendants and your descendants forever. Then he arose and departed while Jonathan went into the city. This is one of the last times, there's a couple of occasions, but one of the last few times that Jonathan and David are able to hang out together for the rest of their lives. Everything changes from this point forward. And he cared. And I intentionally brought you to this part of the text because I want you to know this, that those in the LGBTQ plus community love to go to verses 40 and 41, and say, look, David and Jonathan were more than just friends because it says they kissed each other. But culturally, that was normal. We read in Genesis 31:55 that early in the morning Laban arose, he kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them, and he departed and returned to his place. And you say, yeah, but that's a son and daughter and father, absolutely. But the kissing is a farewell, if you will. We see this in Acts 20. In Acts 20:37, when Paul the Apostle is meeting with the pastors of Ephesus, we read this. They began to weep aloud and embrace Paul and repeatedly kissed him, grieving especially over the word which he had spoken, that they would not see his face again, and they were accompanying him to the ship. Paul and the pastors of Ephesus, it says, kissed. In that culture, it's an affectionate, farewell because they're never going to see each other again. It's nothing more than a deep, deep friendship. And Jonathan and David care. And I do ask you this. How many friends do you really have? Just how many friends are you really a friend to? That the minute this service is over and Sunday school is over, that you'll pick up the phone. They'll pick up the phone, and whatever the call, you'll drop everything. You say, well, preacher, I don't have many of those. I don't have many friends. Well, I'll be transparent with you. I've got a ton of acquaintances in life. Do I have a ton of friends? I don't know. I would like to think so, but the truth of the matter is, Jonathan and David friends, those are hard to come by. You may sit in this room and say, I don't have very many of those. And there may be somebody that says, preacher, you don't understand that I've been abandoned so much, I don't have a single one of those. I can say that I at least got one of those. I know a few people in my life that no matter what, at the drop of a hat, they will answer, and whatever happens, there's going to be help. But somebody may say, I don't know if I got any of that. I want you to know there's one that is a true friend. His name is Jesus. You see, all throughout this series, I've been pointing out in many ways how David is a precursor to the son of David. But to remind us that there's a huge difference between David and Jesus, the script is flipped. And Jonathan has a friend to him like Jesus. You say, what do you mean? Well, you see, Jesus, what he does is he intervenes. He sat at the right hand of the Father. He looked at a fallen creation and said, I will leave the right hand of the Father. I'll be born of a virgin, and I will enter into a fallen world, and I will intervene in their lives. You see, I will sacrifice, that I will intervene, I'll live 30-something odd years, I will go to the cross, and I will die for them, and I will be their sacrifice. And after the sacrifice, there's a resurrection. We talked about a resurrection earlier. The reason there's going to be a resurrection in the future is because Jesus was resurrected before. He ascended to the right hand of the Father, and you know what he does? He speaks up for his people. That when they're going through difficulty and you don't know what to pray and you don't know what to say, there's a friend at the right hand of the Father who says, I got this. I know what to say. Jesus himself said in the book of John 15:13, greater love has no one than this, that one lays down his life for his friends. You know what a true friend does? You're in trouble. I got a wife. I got kids. I got a husband. I got parents. I got all these things. But I'm willing to lay down my life in the midst of all of that because I care about you. Probably don't have many friends like that. There's one. His name is Jesus. He said, I got 12 guys I've been pouring into. I'll leave them. I got a mother that needs tending to. I'll leave her and make sure John takes care of her. I'll leave all of those things. Jesus says, because I care about you. Because I want to be a friend to you like Jonathan was to David. Maybe you're here this morning, believer in Jesus Christ. Could you just do this? First off, as we go on this invitation, would you just thank Jesus for being a friend? We call Jesus a whole lot of things. But can you just thank Jesus? Oh, what a friend I have in Jesus. What a friend. That he would lay down his life, that he would intervene, sacrifice, speak up because he cares about you and me. And then, if you have a few people in your life that you believe have the biblical definition of a friendship, would you just take a moment to say, thank God for him and her, because there's not a lot of people that can say that. Not friendship that society means, not the friends in social media, but I mean a biblical form of friendship. Would you just thank God that you have some people? Hear me say this. For Jonathan, blood was not thicker than water. You hear me? Like there's a lot of people who live by the mantra, blood is thicker than water. Not for Jonathan. He says, this is my friend, and I'm going to do whatever it takes for the friendship because I love him. And that's how Jesus loves. Would you thank God for the friends that you have in your life? And then would you examine your life and decide who you need to be a better friend for? But maybe, just maybe, you're here this morning and you say, you know what? I don't have a lot of friends. Well, I want you to know, if you haven't trusted in Jesus Christ through faith, I want you to understand there's one that wants to be your friend. His name is Jesus. He wants to be your Lord. He wants to be your Savior. But in addition to those things, He simply wants to be a friend. And He has sacrificed all for you. Would you trust in Him and discover what true friendship looks like? Let's pray together. Lord God, I come before you this morning. Not even really knowing the words to say, except thank you. We throw around these phrases and these words so much that we often overlook the biblical definition of a friend. That in our crisis, they will drop everything important to them to be with us. And if we're honest, those are hard to come by because everyone's busy. Everybody's got their thing. Everybody's got their thing going on and their activities and their hobbies and their work. And we use phrases, but we don't always mean them the way Jonathan and David do. Father, thank you for the friends of life. That you've allowed us to have people in our life who will drop everything. I praise you for that. But even more than that, we thank you that you sent your Son. That He would intervene in a fallen world. That He would sacrifice upon a cross. And that now He lives to speak up for us when we don't know what to say. We call Jesus a lot of things. But He uses the word friend. Thank you for that. And for the ones that do not know Him yet, I pray they'll meet Him today by the conviction of your Spirit and will discover what a friend they can have in Jesus.